Welcome to the Being Known podcast with my friend, Dr. Desire, a.k.a. Dr. Curt Thompson.
Oh, my gracious. And my friend Pepper Sweetie. Oh, my gosh.
We are here to discover and explore what it means to be truly known. Hey, Curt. You know, this season, we have been talking about confessional communities, and, if we say we're here to discover what it means to be truly known, this is a great way to go about that discovery, as we've heard in this season. And today we are going to be taking some of your questions that you've written in on social media to us, and going to be answering those questions. But I do want to say, just off the top, that this is not going to be an abridged version of the season. You're not going to just tune into this episode and understand everything about confessional communities. I'm sorry, you got to do a little bit of the work. You got to go back to episode 1 and listen through these episodes. They're actually very short episodes this season purposely. And we've put a lot of information in these, and hopefully you are enjoying this season.
Yeah. And the questions that we'll look at. I mean, they're important, and they are. I think in some respects it's reflective of how, in some respects, you can talk about these confessional communities in as much depth as you want to. And I think there will still be questions that will remain unanswered until you're actually part of one.
Yeah.
I think that's...
It's like when somebody asks you when they haven't had children yet, and they ask you what it's like. It's like, I mean, you can't, there's no way. You've got to, you have to live it in order to really understand it. I was thinking about this season myself, and I'm hearkening back to season 1 when we were talking about the 9 domains of integration. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking about Dan Siegel's illustration of the river of integration that runs down the middle and the one shore on the one side is chaos, and the other side is rigidity, right? And I think about your illustration of the orchestra and how all the parts need to be integrated and play together. And I guess I'm wondering if you can talk about how these confessional communities manifest this idea of integration.
Yeah. Well, I think we hear one of the things that we do is we frequently like to go back and be and just kind of pay rightful homage to the biblical narrative out of which all this emerges in this sense. So we begin with this idea that integration is showing up on the first 2 pages of the Bible. It's showing up right away. This sense of these differentiated, like these well-differentiated parts, like each day is differentiated from the next day. But within each day, there are also differentiated parts, night and day, or land and sea, and so forth. And in the same way, in a confessional community, first of all, we have the obvious differentiated parts of each person who's in the room that come with their respective stories. We have, in our case, in the confessional communities that we facilitate in our practice, we have the particular roles that the therapists play. That in some respects, not unlike a family, we play the role of mom and dad. We're the parents in the room. And then there are the different parts of each person that are also brought into the room. So, like, this is where the orchestra becomes helpful in that you've got, if you've got 8 people in your group, you've got 8 sections of your orchestra. So I've got the sections over here but I don't just have one flute. Like, I've got several flutes, and each flautist, like they've got their own particular skill sets, and their flutes aren't the same. And there's a particular, they don't sound actually technically exactly alike. And so each person is going to bring their own parts of the stories. But the beautiful part about this is that, if I'm playing the oboe, but I'm also listening to the strings that are playing, their play at the same time that I'm playing is shaping how I'm playing. Like we are listening. I'm watching the conductor. I'm listening to them. And there is a creation that emerges that I, by myself, could not have done.
Mm-hmm.
And I become a better player. I become a better violinist because of what everybody else around me is doing, including the moments when my neighbor that's sitting right next to me, I hear or they hear me. Like we might miss a note here or there. We might. And so we bring this, we bring all of the parts of us that feel chaotic and the parts of us that feel rigid, and we bring them into this space. And we do have to do the work of saying, oh, there is this bank of the river over here. This is a part of my life that is feeling chaotic at the moment. And this space becomes a space in which, without condemnation, we're saying, well, wait a minute, let's pause for a second. Can you play those two measures for us that you're having so much trouble with? Where you get to them and you're just like all over the map. Like, but I don't like. Can't I go home and practice these by myself so I don't have to be embarrassed? No. I want you to learn that we are with you in this. We're not over here rolling our eyes thinking like, why can't you get those two measures straight?
Yeah.
No. We want you to become the best oboist that you can be, because when you become that, like you help me become better at what I do. And you do this by revealing your vulnerability. And the vulnerability that you reveal is like, I don't play every note perfectly. In fact, there are whole sections of this concerto that it just feels like why am I even here on the stage? And so I think in many respects, this is when we bring all the things that we sense and image and feel and think, all the stories that we tell, but we're doing this all within the context, like we have a conductor whose job it is to bring all this together. And in our case, we're saying that ultimately the conductor is the movement of the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
We're trusting that the Spirit is in the middle of this, bringing all this together.
You talk about these confessional communities as practicing being human.
Yeah, becoming a professional human being.
Becoming a professional human being. And I just have this image of them being like orchestra practice.
Yeah.
Practicing being integrated in the orchestra. And it's beautiful.
Right. And it is both the most supportive, effective way. Like, so you do Orange Theory.
Yes.
And when you go and do Orange Theory, now I've never done that, but I'm presuming that there are other people that are there.
Oh yeah. It's a room full of people, and everybody is. We have a leader who's basically telling us what to do, and also giving us feedback, and we're all going at our own personal paces. We're doing our own personal best. Everybody's at different levels and fitness, and it's. To me, and as I was mentioning to you and Amy earlier today, I haven't been able to do it for a couple of weeks because I'm having some health issues. Not health issues. I'm having some back issues. Getting them straightened out so I can get back. But I've missed it so much, and not just because of the physical fitness of it and the endorphins that I get from it, and and all that, but also it's one of the only parts of my day where I'm around a lot of people.
Yeah.
It just is because of the nature of my work. So,
yeah. So I'm imagining, okay, so what would it be like if your Orange Theory is just, you're at your house and you have the machines and you're like looking at a screen and you're just doing it by yourself. Or if you were to go to the Orange Theory gym and it's just you.
No.
Yeah. No. I mean, we were made for each other. And we live in a world that, again, as we've often said, we live in a world that actively is training us as in that, oh my gosh, like the opening chapter of The Great Divorce, where Lewis, describes hell as being this place where people are building their homes further and further and further away from each other.
Yeah.
And we have a world that is training us to do that very thing. All the while talking about the importance of connection and the illusion that social media is going to really do this. And that's not to minimize connections that have been made, but it certainly has not made us better people. It has certainly over time only fed our felt sense of disconnection. And when we enter into these confessional communities, like, it's live action, baby. It is live action. It is in the room. It is here and now. This is not, this is not pretend. And this is not like imaginary relationships. It's as real as it gets.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Some of the questions that we had received this week are a little more of maybe even a tactical nature. So here's a question saying, is it possible to have a confessional community in a church setting, or with a group who is doing life together, sharing personal stories that may involve others in the group that they know also, because they're doing life together outside of the group, I think is the question here. She says that he or she says that they've personally seen this happen, but they'd love to hear your take on it.
Well, I think this addresses, I think, one question that sometimes comes up, and that is that, like, well, come on, Curt, like, the things that you're talking about that you do in your practice, I mean, they're in a practice, it's a psychotherapy setting. It's not like real life, because, like, that's not how we do real life. We're in the church. How can we do that in the church? How can we be confidential like that? We have all these rules, in the psychotherapy session. And to which my response typically is, well, as it turns out, everything that we do in the psychotherapy session, in these confessional communities, in the practice, we're doing the same thing in the real world. It's just that here we're actually being explicit and naming what is actually happening between us. And what we're doing in the confessional community is we are putting ourselves in a position in which we have to take these interactions very seriously. Like, confidentiality, like, you just don't go talking about this stuff. We don't have interactions with each other outside. And what does that, like, why is, and at first glance, you're like, well, gosh, like, we can't have dinner together. We can't, like, two of us can't go off and do this together and do that. So, like, I get that. But what that means is that what's happening in these communities is that you are distilling the essence of the best and hardest work that we as human beings can do. And so, to answer the question, yes. You could do these things in a church. And if you, and like, you could say, like, we're going to have this conversation and we're going to be confidential about it. That's how much I value you. Remember, confidential comes from the word what? Confidence. I'm keeping you in my confidence. What does that mean? Well, I'm not just confident in your being able to hold what I've shared with you. It also means that because of that, I have complete confidence in putting everything of who I am on the table. You create confidence within me to put my whole self here. But we come into church, and the vast majority of the work that we do there is spent hiding from everybody else in the room. While we worship, while we pray, while we preach, while we listen to preaching, like all the things that we do. But our behavior, our actual behavior in its depth, never makes it into the room. Like, our souls have a hard time making it into the room. Oh, we bring our souls privately into the room. So there's 300 or 3,000 of me sitting in the chair listening to the person preach. And I go home and eat potato salad for lunch. But what's happening in the room that's actually forming me in my depth? Now, this is not to suggest that what we are doing is useless or without help or are not helpful. I'm not saying like many things that we do are helpful. I'm simply saying that yes, we could do these things, but it feels risky. And why? Because we would have to take relationships seriously, perhaps in ways that we never have. We would have to be serious about not speaking, like not gossiping, not telling things to other people about the things that took place in this circle of conversation, and be okay with that and trust that this is what God's doing. And now we've got 30 of these kinds of groups in our church, and not everybody gets to know what everybody else's business is, because this is the work of the Spirit in these small communities. And we can come up with all kinds of things that we would be afraid of that are going to happen. Like what happens when you start to talk about sex between two people, a male and a female, who are not married to each other. And they have these things that are emerging, like they're attracted to each other. Yeah, what about it? You think that's not happening in the pew on Sunday morning? It's just that here, we're going to name this, and we're going to name what's underneath that and what's underneath that. And what we're going to get to is like we each have this deep longing to be seen, soothed, safe, secure. I long to be held, because what part of that is me? Oh, that's the 4-year-old in me that is still waiting for my mom to show up. But because I never have a conversation that takes me seriously enough, nor do I take me seriously enough, I never get to that. Instead, I'm just burning tons of energy trying to keep that part of me at bay, and I'm just going to white knuckle it and work really hard not to look at porn and not to lust about anybody else who's in the congregation. And that's about as good as it gets for me. And to which we would want to say, you read the New Testament? Paul, Peter, James, John, the gospel writers, they all have a very different idea about what Jesus has in store for us. This life of practicing for heaven is not about white knuckling until Jesus comes. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, when my first sort of exposure to I put quotes around this confessional community because we weren't calling it that necessarily, but was back in a church in California, and I think one of the issues was there was so much great about it, and there was so much sharing going on and everything, but I don't think that there was a safety guidelines put in at all. There were no, so one particular time for me, like I realized that some things that I had shared went out on the prayer chain, right? They went out on the, suddenly, other people were talking about things that I had thought I shared in confidence. Mm-hmm. And I think even me at that time was not probably mature enough to go right to the person and say, hey, let's talk about what happened. Instead, I was hurt and kind of pushed away for a little bit. It took a while for me to get back into a community like that because there were some things that were shared that, should never have been. But I do think that goes back to the importance of having some parameters in place before we start one of these.
Right. There's no question that we do. And again, I think. So let's just take that for instance. Just from a formational standpoint, somebody shares something and it goes out on a prayer chain, and you wonder, why is that? Why do they not first ask someone, "Hey, would you mind if I share this with people?" Now, I get it. My impulse is oh yeah, I want to share this with people because somehow if we cast a wide net of people who are praying, that this is we in our imaginations think there's going to be more people talking to God, and somehow the odds increase of God hearing it more effective. It's going to be, what I mean?
Yeah.
This is kind of how we operate.
Right.
And I want to suggest first of all, I don't know that that's actually true. That God is more attentive if you get 3,000 people praying than if you get just 30 people praying. If you look at oh my gosh, who's the judge who he had 300 guys and he whittled them down to just a bunch of men, right? In the Old Testament, where God doesn't actually need, right? But there is this sense, and we just kind of have this automaticity, in which we do this because we're not We're not actually yet first being curious about, what's happening in the room between you and me as you just share this. What would that be like?
Yeah.
Which means I'm actually, when that kind of thing happens, and I just say, we're going to pray for all this. Now, again, this is not to suggest that we should not be sending things out on prayer chain. It's not about that. It is about our becoming increasingly curious about what's happening in the room right now. And if I'm curious about you when you share this, there's going to be a lot more that I'm going to want to know to make sure that you know that I want you to be seen, soothed, safe, secure, like that you can trust me to protect you.
Yeah.
And if I'm quickly sharing this with somebody else, it means I've pretty quickly moved on from you to something else. Like I'm not actually as in the room.
Right.
Which tells us something. First of all, the first thing it says, it's not that doesn't just say, I don't really care that much about Pepper. It also really kind of pulls the curtain back on my awareness of like the role that I actually believe I play. The fact that I'm more quickly willing to like send this down the prayer chain than for me to be with you, like is a bit of a sense of like, I don't actually sense that I carry much weight. And that in asking you, what would you like for me to do with this? I don't have the sense that like I matter, such that my curiosity is going to play a role for you. And this is what we've said so often, right? We can't give what we don't have. And our biggest problem as human beings is not that we don't love well. That's obvious. But our biggest problem is that we are not able to be receptive to love. And if I'm not receptive to love, it means I got all kinds of parts of me that are internal that like haven't yet like heard the news. And if they haven't heard the news, I'm just going to end up spending a lot of time, effort, and energy managing all that stuff and kind of living automatically without being very mindful that like, oh my gosh, like my presence with you in this moment right now, dude, like it's the only moment I have. Like 30 seconds from now, I could be dead. Am I willing to believe that God so loves us that right now is live action that needs to be attuned to? Oh, sorry, I'm just kind of going off the path.
No, that's great. That's really good. That's really good. Yeah, and you know, later as I've incorporated more of that kind of thing into those groups, it changes everything. But you're totally right. Okay, so I have a question here from a therapist. I'm very intrigued and interested in a confessional community. How does it work for professionals to be involved in these communities when taking things like ethics, confidentiality, and dual relationships into consideration?
This is a great question. We could probably have a 30-minute conversation about this because it covers lots of really important ground. The first thing that we provide these trainings for confessional communities through the Center for Being Known and through our practice, New Story Behavioral Health, which we'll come back to in just a moment. And many of these trainings and many of these groups that are forming through the Center for Being Known include people who are therapists, who are in groups with other people who are not therapists, of course. And they walk through the storytelling liturgy. They walk through, and they do this for about 6 months and so forth. And we make it plain that those groups that CBK is training, like these are not psychotherapy groups. And what we're really doing is we're really trying to practice telling our stories more truly. And so, of course, the ethics of like, well, what people choose to say and don't choose to say is different in those settings than they would be if they're talking to a therapist in a designated professional setting. But it is no different in terms of it raising the stakes, as we were just talking about in addressing the previous question. It raises the stakes of like, even if it's not a professional setting, being in this group really does place a demand on me to take someone else so seriously that I'm going to care for their story so tenderly that I'm not going to talk about this with anybody else. because it's not just that I have a relationship with you, is that this community has a relationship that is particular to this community. And so I don't just have a relationship with you in the community, like there's a community, but you and I, like it's not separate from the community. And so I don't do anything, if I were to divulge something of your story, like I'm not just hurting you, I'm hurting the entire process, I'm hurting everybody in the group, including myself. And so these are things that a therapist rightly would be curious about and want to know about. I mean, I think that, in the trainings that we provide, both for CBK and in the intensives that we run at New Story Behavioral Health, we cover a lot of these questions in greater detail. We don't have time to go into all that. But I think it is fair to say that what we've seen so far, especially with CBK, where it is not professionally driven, as it were, that people are finding that they're able to do this work really effectively with a fairly reasonable dose of common sense, and with the guidelines that we provide during the training. And I think specific to that, I want to say, and I realize I haven't given the answer to this question. I haven't given every jot and tittle answer. Well, here are the ethics, and here's how you roll them out, and so forth. I mean, we don't have time to go into all that, but I would say that we do provide space where we talk about those kinds of things in these trainings. I made a mistake in, I think, the first or second episode here.
I made a mistake once too. It was I think it was 1974. It was something really minor.
Weren't you born in 1975?
It was super minor, but it was my mistake. So go ahead, share us your mistake. What did you do?
Yeah. Well, now I can't really remember, so maybe I didn't.
New Story Behavioral Health.
Yeah, right. So New Story Behavioral Health is providing intensives, which are 2.5-day trainings. And I mentioned, I think in the first or second episode, that in December we have an intensive that's coming up for therapists. I mentioned that. It's not for therapists. The one in December is for anyone who wants to be part of this intensive. In March of 2024 that's the plan that we have. It's going to be the first one that we have for professionals in particular. Now, right now, we're thinking it's going to be therapists, but we're toying with the idea of maybe perhaps including some others in helping professions. But it's going to be for maybe even for pastors who are wanting to be who are wanting to use this model for their for their small groups. That's going to be in March. It's not the one, and we already have people that are signing up for that in March for therapists. So by all means, if you're a therapist and you're looking for this kind of training, it's going to be in March. It's probably going to be 3 days, if not more, not just 2.5. And the one in December is one we're doing for anyone else who qualifies. And you can contact New Story Behavioral Health, and you'll end up having a screening conversation with Courtney Morrison, our clinical director, about that.
Is there
anything
a
more I should say
website
about that?
Is there a website that they can go to that you?
Yeah, it's New Story Behavioral Health. And it's newstorybh.com, I think, and you'll go and you'll see events, and you click on that drop down box, and it'll take you right to it. You can register, and then there's an application, and then you'll have a screening conversation with Courtney. But the one in December is for all comers. And the one in March is going to be specifically for therapists, and it's going to be taking on a different, more in-depth tack.
That's great. You mentioned CBK there, and for those of you who might not know what that is, maybe that's a nascent group of lettering for you. CBK is the Center for Being Known, and one of the exciting things about the Center for Being Known, along with all the other things that they do, is this October, October 27th, is the Connections Conference, and the day before that, October 26th, Curt and Amy and I will be doing a live podcast So we want you to come for that, and then stay for the Connections conference the next day, which is an all-day conference, beautiful conference. And to find out information on this, go to thecbk.org. When you get there, the top tabs, there'll be one that says Connections Conference. Just click on that, and that'll take you so you can register for both the podcast and the conference the following day. And Curt's got a great group of speakers that are going to be joining us. We've been doing a lot of planning leading up to this, and so we're very excited for us to all be in the room where it happens. Don't miss it. You'll be sorry if you do, and you'll be sorry because
and we'll I won't be sorry if you're sorry, because
no. Right. And I do want to mention, I do want to mention that Curt has his next book coming out, The Deepest Place. It's a gorgeous book, Suffering and the Formation of Hope. A beautiful book that we want to get in your hands as soon as possible. You can pre-order it now, right now, today. If you pre-order it, you will get the first chapter right away, so that you can read that, and you will also receive. We did a podcast on, I believe it's the fourth chapter of the book, on glory. So Curt had the opportunity to share about that, some insights about that particular chapter, and that'll be available to you if you pre-order the book as well. Is there a specific place or just anywhere where they get their books that you would like them to go?
Well, I think one place you can go to Amazon. You can get it through my website, so CurtThompsonMD.com. You'll get the opportunity to go right from the website there, Amazon, or through Zondervan. You can go those three different, or wherever other books are sold, I guess.
Yeah. We are, this is the end of this season 7 on Confessional Communities. We certainly hope that you found it helpful. I want to give a special thank you to Compassion International, who has come on board with us this season, but also to all of you who have given to this great organization. As you heard in the mid-show ad there about Compassion International, they're doing a program where $50 can feed a family of 5 for a month, and it's just incredible, and so excited to get to be a part of that. I want to thank Kara, Mark, Keaton, and Jenny, all people who are sort of behind the scenes here that are working hard and helping us produce this podcast. And I would like to announce that Season 8 is coming.
Dude.
And Season 8 is going to be the path of oncoming beauty. We are all going to be putting ourselves in the path of oncoming beauty. And I'm excited about every season, but I'm really excited about this season. I think you're going to find it unique and helpful, and we're going to be digging into that here really soon.
Yeah, and I think there's so many different. We cover a wide range of topics here, and one of them we often talk about that. What does it mean for us to put ourselves in the path of oncoming beauty and discovering and creating and curating that and so forth? But this will be the first time that we're actually kind of pausing and drilling deeply into that particular practice, and really coming to the podcast with different forms of artistic expressions and so forth and beauty that we really want to invite people to consider, because it is easy for us to imagine, that notion that I myself am an icon of beauty that God is creating. Oh, that's right. And then I go back, I go off on my day, and by the end of the day, I'm like, I don't really, beauty is not really how I would describe how this day went. I have other words, some of which my Quaker grandmother would not want me to use to describe my day. And I think practicing, immersing ourselves in this will be it's just really exciting.
The very first conversation that you and I had about this podcast, about, once Amy put this whole thing together, we had a conversation, and that whole conversation was about beauty. And I was like, why aren't we recording this right now? Like this is gold. So I'm really excited about diving into that. So those of you who are watching on YouTube, and if you aren't watching on YouTube, I suggest that you go over there right now, because we're going to bring Amy on board, and we're going to talk a little bit about how confessional communities have impacted some of us here. So thank you very much, Curt. It's a great season.
All right,
Love you, buddy.
Dude, great to be with you. Thanks. Hey, Michela.
I am now in the path of oncoming beauty.
I'm glad that I was just going to say, I'm just really, I've been kind of been waiting for a while to see, like, oh, I wonder when she's going to realize this.
And
Amy
then
and
put words to it.
Amy and I and Kara the other day were talking about we want to put together some swag, or maybe some T-shirts or something. And I said I want mine that just says, "You're in the path of oncoming beauty." Get out of my way.
Or remember the shirts that said, I don't know why I bring this up all the time.
Yeah.
That said, "I'm with stupid," and then it had an arrow that pointed to your left or your right.
Yeah.
Like, I'm in the path of oncoming beauty, and Peps would just point up, like.
No, I think it should be. I think Curt should have one that says, "I'm with the most beautiful man in the world," and I have one that says, "I'm with Dr. Desire," and Amy should have one that says, "I'm with these two bozos."
We have a lot of T-shirts to make.
We
We do.
Better get busy.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, the wrap of season 7. Okay, so on July 24th, I love anniversaries. That'll be 3 years since we had our practice recording.
Yes.
3 years.
Wow. That's amazing.
Right?
Yeah.
That's
I think
stunning.
I told you. Time
Wait,
flies
what'd
when
you
you're
say?
having. Time flies when you're having
Yes.
fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Feels like 10 to me.
10 years. Yeah.
It's like 10 years.
Yeah. So, Amy, I don't know if you want to give a reflection, or I have a question that I'd like to ask. I don't know how.
Yeah, let's go with your question.
Yeah. Okay. So, how did you join a confessional community? And I would love to hear from you an experience that you had in a confessional community.
Speaking of confidentiality, I'm kidding. It's my experience.
It's your experience. It's not. Yeah. So I'm asking you,
So,
Amy.
how I joined one, I was looking for a group experience, and so I asked a friend who was in the confessional community if she knew of a facilitator or a group that was going on, and she did. Thank goodness. So that's how I just asked around.
Yeah.
Okay, an experience. I've been in it for almost 6 years, so it's like, okay, think of one experience. I think one of the most, I cannot say enough about this group and the work that's done. Okay, so what we grew up with, or what we were taught, we continue on. I continue on unless I come to a point where, like, that is not serving me very well. And so I'm going to share a belief or something that I learned, and then and I discovered this in the confessional community. But like, if I was, as a kid, if I was angry or annoyed or frustrated, and I let it be known, I was punished. And the punishment was emotional detachment, which I would have, I don't know. That was devastating to me. So as a result, I would not share with someone if I was angry, because I anticipated emotional detachment. And some would say as a kid, that was a good thing that I didn't share it because I didn't have any other tools. But as an adult, it's limiting. It's limited. Limitating. That's a good word.
It's a new word. We're just going to start to use it. That's limitating.
We are.
Right. You float when you experience
That's right.
limitating.
That's right.
So in confessional community, our job is to put the words to our thoughts and feelings. So if I got Sarah, who I've been in group with for 6 years, and so I get connected. The group gets connected to each other. So when I was angry or frustrated, I would get anxious because it would just wash over me. Because I'm thinking, I'm experiencing this right now, and I should be putting words to it. And so we would start at a very, like Curt, you've said before, what would it mean if you talked about it? You don't even have to talk about the it.
Mm-hmm.
But I would talk about my anxiety. So then, so two things would happen. Sarah didn't go away. Now, she could have gone away, but she was interested. She was curious about why I was angry with her. Is this making sense?
Yes.
Yes.
So that was happening. But then also the facilitator, I got angry with a lot of people, which, so she would say, because I'm like, oh my gosh, I can be angry. So the facilitator said, Amy, anytime you are angry or frustrated or annoyed with me, I want to hear about it. Every time. Every time. I welcome that. I feel more connected to you. So that was new language. I'm like, wait till I do it. Like,
right.
Yeah.
Right.
When I do it, it's going to be a different story.
It's bait and switch.
Bait and switch, which did not happen. And then Sarah, who was a fellow in the group, we worked. She didn't go anywhere. But even if it wasn't super curious about my anger, I learned that I could tolerate anybody's response. So it wasn't that I had to have this overwhelmingly welcoming to my anger. Like they didn't have to welcome my anger. I could tolerate anyone's response. So that's a group experience.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. Yeah. But, and that can't, where else is that going to happen?
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
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 Right. I mean, and I love how you, love, not that it happened to you, but like, I love how you described, you get anxious.
Right.
Because you're working so hard to contain what you're really experiencing.
Right.
And what happens to so many of us is that like we're doing that all the time, and then we're anxious, and we think that our anxiety, like, why am I anxious? And my anxiety, like, I shouldn't be anxious. I don't like my anxiety. So I see then even my body's response to try to get my attention to the fact that I'm angry as a problem, and so I try to get rid of that as well.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I imagine it took you some work, Amy, even to realize that emotional detachment was happening. And you know what I mean? Like to understand what that was. You don't just
no.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, you're not aware as a 6-year-old.
And that happens in the group too. Right.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times the facilitator will say, okay, let's slow down. And some people in the group don't like that. They're like, but when you slow down, it's like, then it gives everyone an opportunity to respond. But it also, then you see stuff, you see, okay, I didn't realize I was afraid of emotional detachment. I just knew that when I was mad, I went away. Then someone would say, Amy, where'd you go? Because you haven't talked in 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to tell you where I went.
That would be, I wouldn't know what that experience would be like here.
Right. If you hadn't talked in 10 minutes.
To have you not talk. I mean, I don't know that I don't know that would be a problem here, but I mean, I would.
Yeah. I'd be breaking glass on the pads and, charging you with them because I'm
like breaking the pen. Now I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Very funny, guys.
So someone wants to know if we have our own confession sessions outside of the podcast, the three of us.
Oh, the three of us?
Yeah.
Why, yes, we do.
Well, before we do that, like we do. I mean, but I just want to say that even before we get on this recording, like I had stuff going on.
Yeah.
Right. This is what the question is. Do we do that? What you're about ready to
do
talk
we do
about?
that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, among the three of us.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yes.
mean, I had stuff going on internally for me that has been this week just driving me around the bend, and I do have a group of guys that I meet with every Tuesday morning that are usually because people have been out of town, summer. I haven't met with these guys now for 3 weeks. I mean, it's it's like not having enough fluid in your system. Like you don't go for a day, let alone several days, without drinking fluid. Like you got to be hydrated, and that's what it feels like. And I could not wait to get to this morning in order to be able to name these things, because I am my worst enemy in my head, and it's just such a man. It's like coming home. I mean, to a home that you want to come home to.
Yeah,
not all.
Home of your
I realize
choosing.
for some of us that wouldn't be a thing you would want to do, but like it's it's the thing that I would want to do. And so to have you in my heart, in my mind, like it just I'm in a completely different place than I was an hour and a half ago.
And I've experienced that with you guys so many times. I mean, come in with something and feeling a certain way, and after that time that we have together, and we purposely block out extra time on these days that we're recording so that we can start with that, because that's to me, I don't want to say that's just it's equally as important, if not more important, than the time that we spend actually recording.
Yeah. Well, and I'll just want to add this one extra detail for this morning, what it was like, because part of what I shared. But I mean, not part of what I shared. What I shared, there was a part of me that was worried. So I didn't come here to talk about this thing that had happened to me outside of here. Like, it had. And so I didn't just need a place where you guys could hear me and empathize with me about things that had happened to me outside of here. Like, there was a part of me that was afraid to tell you.
Yeah.
Because of what because I'm afraid, not just about me, but like how what I'm telling you is going to affect us, is going to change, is going to, because I like, and so it's. I mean, this is the thing. This example of how these confessional communities are not just about for us to come and talk about the problems that exist outside of that community. Like the community becomes the place where those relationships, like, are the relationships with which I have to work things out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and I think, like, as you say that, Curt, I think, so there is fear and trepidation that comes up for the three of us. It's not like, oh, we know how to do this. It's easy.
Totally.
Right.
It is work. It is challenging at times.
Yeah. Well, we just reminded, for our listeners, I was at Hope Heals Camp last week, and my role was as the pastor for the volunteers, and for the week we sat in the 11th chapter of John, and many we would say, oh, this is the story about Lazarus dying, and Jesus raises him from the dead. And we say, what's interesting is that the main character, Lazarus, has no lines whatsoever in the entire thing. Like, he doesn't say a single. Because, as it turns out, even though we think that it's about him, the story actually is about Mary, Martha, and the disciples, and Jesus. That's what the story, and the other neighbors who were all. That's what the story is about. And if you're Lazarus, you're like, oh, I die, and then you raise me from the dead, and now I get to do this all over again at some point? Like, this is like, he didn't ask for this.
Right.
And so I think it is a reminder to me that I am Jesus is continually coming to find parts of me that he's raising from the dead, and he's going to come find me again and find me again, because like I don't get to a point where I'm like, oh, okay, now I have this. I'm never going to be afraid again to say anything else here in our community. No, we're having to work at things, because he's coming for all the parts that are not yet healed and still need to be.
Right.
He's never not.
Coming, not.
He's never
coming.
not
He is coming, not.
He's never not.
No, he's never not
So
coming
there are two
for us.
nots.
He's
No,
never
I think
not
there were
coming
two
for us.
knots.
Not.
Never not.
Never not.
That's a never not is
See,
a
that's
double
too-
negative in itself.
That's limiting.
Well,
limiting.
it means he's
That's
always
very limiting.
it's another
Right.
way to say
Yes.
he's always coming for us.
Yeah. Or we could just say
He's never not.
he's always coming for us.
Yeah.
Cut to the chase.
That's not nearly as fun.
It isn't. Hey guys, this was great. Thanks for this, all your work this season. And I hope people have found this really helpful. And we want to encourage people to go to the cbk.org and see about learning more about confessional communities and new behavioral health as well.
New Story Behavioral Health.
New Story Behavioral Health as well.
Yep.
And that's a second mistake. I made one in 78.
And
And then
today,
this one, I
what's
left
today?
the word story out. Right. I'm going to
July
have to
21st.
mark this down.
What? Wow.
Listen, that's wounding. New Story Behavioral Health. They have some things coming up that Curt talked about in the episode. Check those out, and we'll see you all in October. And before then, we'll be back with our next season.
Right on.
Yep.
Love you
Thanks,
guys.
guys. Love
Right.
you.
Love you. This podcast is produced by Curt Thompson, Pepper Sweeney, and myself, Amy Chella. Audio production and editing is by Keaton Simons. Video production and editing is done by Mark Gould. If you'd like to connect with us, you can find us on social media at BeingKnownPod. If you like this podcast, tell a friend. If you love this podcast, tell everyone you know. And please like, rate, and review wherever you listen. Be well, be now.